Uh, Thanks, Chai. So, as I said, I'm Danielle from Sustainable Schools New South Wales. I'm joined here by my colleague Chai, who's helping out with tech support. Chai, give us a wave. And then we have four speakers with us today. We've got Simon Collier, who's from the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, otherwise known as ACARA. Thanks, Simon. We've got Shannon Kelly from the Nature School. I've got Daniel Levitt from Our Lady of the Sacred Heart in Kensington, and I've got Rachel Kernaghan from Kimbriki Eco House. And our session today is integrating sustainability into the curriculum. I would like to begin today with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which we live, learn and work. I'm here today on Biripi country. I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and future, and I extend that respect to any First Nations people here with us today. For the last few days, I've been doing a few really long road trips. So I went down to Wiradjuri country, down near Wagga and Bathurst, and it was just amazing to see the landscape and the trees, which are so different from our rainforest home here. So welcome. So to let you know, Sustainable Schools is a project of Environmental Education. So we're the state chapter of the national organisation, the Australian Association for Environmental Education, otherwise known as A Squared E Squared. So we're a not-for-profit professional association for environmental educators, people like you. At Sustainable Schools, we're interested in supporting teachers and educators to create change in their schools. We want to amplify the positive things that are happening in schools across New South Wales and support sustainability educators to increase their capacity to make change. I'm going to share a slide, just a couple of slides, just to let you know what we're doing today. That one. So that's just what we're looking at. That's our program today, our four speakers. And then I did want to say that our program today has been supported by Midwaste. So Midwaste is a regional waste forum in the Mid-North Coast area. So a special hello to all the educators coming in from the Mid-North Coast. So Sustainable Schools, we realise that each school community is unique and has its own journey to becoming sustainable. We do advocate for a whole school approach to sustainability. So when we do that, we're thinking about what are the three key elements? So campus, curriculum and culture. When you're thinking about campus, you're thinking about stuff like your grounds and your infrastructure, your operations and your targets. Are you monitoring and meeting them? When you're thinking about culture, we think about stuff like student and school leadership, partnerships with your school community, and also recognising and celebrating sustainability achievements. And then today we're here talking about curriculum, which is exciting. Going to look at sort of the cross-curricular priority for sustainability. When we're thinking about curricula, we also think about stuff like a sense of place, student-centred action learning, outdoor learning and a connection to country. So this is how we think about here, about a whole school approach to sustainability. And it's always really interesting to see how different schools are making that happen in their place. So I'm going to pass on now to our first speaker. So our first speaker is Simon Collier from ACARA. Simon was a panelist at our recent National Environmental Education Conference in Wollongong. And when I met him there, he was speaking about the current landscape for environmental education. So I was keen to have Simon to come along to do a bit of a dive into the new version of the sustainability cross-curricular priority. So thanks so much, Simon.
No problem. Thank you, Danielle. And just check, can I get a thumbs up that you can see the slides and not the presenter view? Yep. Awesome. Excellent. Yeah, so first of all, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I meet with you today, which is of the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation down in Victoria along the coast in a town not too far from the Great Ocean Road on beautiful Wadawurrung country. Thank you for the opportunity. Today I'm going to give you some insights into the version 9 of the Australian curriculum, in particular the connections to the sustainability cross-curriculum priority. Now I'd like to kind of kick things off with this quote from a UNESCO Learn for Our Planet report, and just to highlight the role that we all play and the role that education plays in sustainability. And I'm really excited to be a part of the presenters today, but also to listen and learn from the other presenters. I think we've got some really fascinating different opportunities to learn from schools and councils and having lots of people involved in what's a really important discussion and focus for sustainability, but as well as education more broadly. So my name's Simon Collier, and I'm a teacher, both primary and secondary teacher. Spent most of my teaching career in Victoria, but currently work for the Australian curriculum as curriculum specialist for science. And that role also includes the sustainability cross-curriculum priority. So why have a national curriculum? So the Australian curriculum was developed to improve the quality, the equity and the transparency of the Australian education system. And in 2020, education ministers agreed for a review of the 3 dimensions of the Australian curriculum, which were then endorsed in 2022 and is available and slowly being implemented across the country. And as you'd be familiar, in New South Wales, the states and territories either adopt or adapt the Australian curriculum into their syllabus documents or documentation, but it all comes from the structure of the Australian curriculum, which is 3 dimensions. And this review process was the first time ever that the whole curriculum, so the 3 dimensions, were reviewed at the same time. So it allowed that opportunity to really look at the connections within the learning areas, across learning area content, but really building the capacity and embedding the other 2 dimensions of the cross-curriculum priorities and the general capabilities. So the aim of the 3 dimensions is to set out the essential knowledge, the understandings and skills all young Australians need, so they'll be able to learn, contribute and shape their world now and into the future. And that aspect and thinking of future is really prominent or evident when we talk about sustainability. In particular, you'll see one of the sets of organising ideas in sustainability is futures. But here you can see the 3 cross-curriculum priorities. These icons represented by each of the colours, for example, represent a set of organising ideas. And I'll explain those in more detail, and we'll look at what they look like within learning area content. So just to kind of give you a bit of a recap here, the content itself, or the cross-curriculum priorities, are there to make the learning area content relevant, contemporary and engaging. All of the organising ideas that underpin these cross-curriculum priorities are incorporated through learning area content in the curriculum. They're not separate learning areas or subjects, and they're to be a natural part of what learning takes place, not to be an added kind of tick box. Yes, we're doing sustainability because we've got a recycling tub in the classroom. So it's really about embedding it into an understanding within the learning areas. And they do provide opportunities to enrich the content. So before we get into what are the sustainability organising ideas, I just wanted to give a bit of a higher level look at how the Australian curriculum is structured. So here we've got an example of a Year 1 science, or Year 1 learning area for science. At the top, you've got the achievement standard, so what we're expecting students to achieve at Year 1. And by clicking on an aspect of that achievement standard, you get a closer look at the provided or the linked content description. And then what that provides is a connection to the relevant 3 dimensions of the curriculum. So you can see here on this example, which is a biological science content description, in the little icons below, you can see critical and creative thinking and sustainability. And then by clicking into that, you get more information about, well, why is that connected? What aspects of sustainability can be seen within that content? And then the elaborations actually go into some examples of what that might look like in the classroom. So I just want to that's the high level look at where sustainability is in the Australian curriculum. The next slide, if you've got an opportunity, if you've got a phone next to you, you can scan the QR code and add to this. But thinking about what sustainability education looks like to you, this is from a Sustainable Schools Summit session that I did. So it's still a live poll, so you can add to it if you like, but you can see some of the key terms that come up when we talk to teachers about what sustainability education looks like. And we can see there collaboration, action, future-proofing, that stewardship, and there's a whole range of different interesting kind of concepts. So I can see a few people kind of in there now and adding to it, which is great. And I'll come back to this and we can look at it again, but thinking about what sustainability looks like in the classroom, and by looking at that, you can see a broad range of examples of where you might see sustainability across the curriculum, from using data to measure things, thinking about responsible use, circular economy, two-way learning, which is obviously a really fantastic way for us to learn from our First Nations Australians, to see how we can look at ensuring that our generation now, we're looking after our environment for future generations as well. So thank you for those that were adding to that. We will come back to that at the end and see what's changed there. But let's look at the priority of sustainability. So the sustainability cross-curriculum priority itself has 4 sets of organising ideas, and they're the different kind of components within that icon. But it explores the knowledges, the skills and values, and particularly the worldviews necessary for people to act in ways that contribute to a sustainable future. So you can see one of the elements there is the worldviews. The one below that is around designing solutions, and that's thinking about solutions and actions for a sustainable future, and requires an understanding of the ways that not only environmental, but social and economic systems interact, and the ability to make balanced judgments based on our present kind of and future impacts. Sustainable patterns of living seek to meet the needs of the present generation without compromising those needs of the future generations. So let's have a look now at the 4 sets of organising ideas. So we've got systems, which is, as it says there, the interdependence of Earth systems. And we're not only talking about Earth systems, but also thinking about the social and economic. Worldviews is that role that worldviews kind of shape our individual ideas, but also community ideas. And design there at the bottom is actually new in the current version 9 of the Australian curriculum. And it looks at how we can explore how innovative and creative design solutions can reduce present and future impacts. And it's really about that designing of products, how we can think about maybe creative and innovative ways to solve solutions. And then the 4th set is around futures and that way of thinking, as well as acting for students to empower students to take action. So each of those sets of organising ideas have 2 or 3 content or organising ideas underneath them that help to build into or help drive the content across the learning areas. In particular, the content descriptions for science, for HAS, or in particular geography, but also some of the history and technologies are really linked quite closely to sustainability and the organising ideas, but there are options or available connections to be made across all learning areas. So some other key changes that took place was around not just focusing on the biosphere, but thinking of all Earth systems, geosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere, as well as thinking about the interdependence of sustainability, thinking about that environmental system, the social system, as well as the economic system. There's a greater emphasis on sustainable design, mitigation of human impacts, restoring environments, and taking action to affect positive change. And as I mentioned, that the content descriptions in science, HAS, and technologies support the development of those organising ideas, but there are opportunities and connections across all of the curriculum. So I've mentioned organising ideas a number of times. So what are they and what do they look like? So we're going to go through and just have a quick look at the structure of the organising ideas. There's quite a bit of text here, so I'm not too phased with you being able to kind of get a sense of all of the content here. The following slide after I go through each of these will give some examples of where it's connected to the learning area content across the curriculum. So we've got three organising ideas here around systems, thinking about life forms being connected, what's the responsible use of resources, as well as I mentioned earlier, the social, economic, and political systems. So here we've got an example of biological science at Year 7. On the right-hand side, you can see at the top, that's the achievement standard that all Year 7s should be able to demonstrate an understanding of. And then below that, with the kind of code there, the AC code, is the content description. So you can see really clearly a connection between the systems organising ideas that are on the previous screen, and there's an example of what a learning sequence might look like in the middle there. Students might go through and how that connects to sustainability, as well as connecting to, obviously, the biology curriculum. Here we've got an example of a school kind of project with a guiding question around what sustainable practices are necessary to maintain clean air, water, and soil and preserve healthy environments. And again, an example here that connects to the systems organising ideas. Worldviews has two organising ideas, focused really around recognising the interdependence and the value of diversity, as well as how worldviews are formed and how we focus on action. So if we look at our geography curriculum at Year 10, the achievement standard again, and the content description, and an example there of a learning sequence which might connect that sustainability worldviews organising ideas with the geography curriculum. And we see an example here of the Reef Guardian School making a really great connection within their work about how worldviews on sustainability formed by either personal, local, or national, and thinking about those global effects of those worldviews as well, and the impacts they can have locally, but obviously thinking about our reefs and our oceans and ocean literacy, how that's a global focus as well.
We've got about 2 minutes left, Simon.
Oh, okay. Yep, no problem.
Thanks.
So just finishing up with the last two. So we've got design, thinking about minimising the impact around design products, making judgments based on these impacts and future directions. It has a really great connection to design technologies. Here's some examples from Year 2 and Year 4, and some guiding questions to think about those connections in regards to sustainability and design organising ideas. This one's a great example. We don't have time to talk through, but again, a really good example of sustainable design in schools. And finally, we have futures, which is really about that need for informed action, evaluating past actions and working towards a desired change. And if we think about our geography curriculum again, and particularly here, our connection to First Nations Australians, thinking about how places have changed and how we can look after our environment, there's a really clear aspect there. And our two-way science initiative, which is fantastic. So given time, I'm going to flick through these next slides and just finish with this. This was a presentation that was given for the Climate Education Summit. You can click on the link below. I'll share this presentation after, but I just wanted to focus kind of on what Costa was saying here around the focus on, we talk about climate change, anxiety and things in kids. And I think how he encapsulated that and the focus on bringing it to people through the love of nature rather than that fear of destruction is a really important message that, particularly when we're working with students across the country, is something that we need to really focus on. So I'll finish with that, and feel free. I'm happy to take questions, but you can contact me at any time as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Simon. I feel like there's a lot more than 15 minutes.
We usually do run a full day on unpacking that and what it looks like in the classroom. So
yeah, absolutely. You've done great in 15 minutes. Can I ask if anyone has any questions? Feel free to just ask them verbally, or you can put them in the chat if you'd like. Right, all my screens are bumping around.
I'd have a question.
Yes, please.
Hi. Sometimes I think that a lot of responsibility is put on students and schools. How can we teach children that their responsibility is also in bigger society and in corporations and things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Oh, am I on mute? No, I'm all clear. Look, I think part of, again, coming back to the curriculum, look, there's the other dimension, which is the general capabilities and thinking about ethical understanding and critical and creative thinking, all come into those kind of big questions. And I think also having the support of people like Sustainable Schools New South Wales and A²E² to support teachers in helping students to just better understand what those big needs are. And I'll think I'll leave it at that, but it's a good question and not one with a quick and easy answer, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you're right, Simon. It's a big picture thing as well, and it is interesting that it does come up a lot. I suppose the way I think about it is, how to encourage action in children and empowering them to make some changes, and whether it's in their own life, but also perhaps, I tend to be a little bit of a political advocate as well, but it's I understand in a school it's not always possible to be looking at those kind of opportunities, but it's definitely good to be able to look at the individual, but then the bigger picture as well. Like it's, definitely not all their problems. Really, is it? Do we have any other questions? No, Simon, I suppose I did have one question. In terms of resources, like stuff that's online to support teachers looking at the new version of the Sustainability Cross-Curricular Priority, is there places where you direct people to
Yeah, so
support materials?
Yeah, the first place is we always try and get teachers, whether it's looking at a certain learning area or a cross-curriculum priority, to go to the Australian Curriculum website. There's a section called Understand This, learning area or understand this cross-curriculum priority. That's where you really find the intent of each of those dimensions of the curriculum. It's, you know, for science, for example, we've got the core concepts that underpin the science curriculum that are in there. So not just going straight to the curriculum content. We also do have professional learning that is being developed that is coming up on our website, but also, again, there's some amazing resources coming out of, you know, places like Sustainable Schools and councils and organisations supporting sustainability across the country. So there's lots out there. But as I said, I think someone's added the contact details there to the chat, and feel free to reach out if you've got any further questions.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much, Simon. I'm just looking at time as well. So we might move on now to our next speaker, who's Shannon Kelly. So Shannon works at the Nature School in Port Macquarie, and in 2022, she was awarded highly commended for the Sustainable Schools Teacher of the Year. So I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to learn a bit more about the innovative approaches being adopted by Shannon and her colleagues at Nature School. Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Danielle. I'm just going to share my screen. Yep. All right. Like Simon, I'm going to do, can everyone see that with a thumbs up or? Awesome. Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
I just wanted to start off with an acknowledgement of country. I'm like Danielle, I'm here on Biripi country in beautiful Port Macquarie. So I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and our elders, both past, present and emerging. So as Danielle said, I'm the curriculum lead here at the Nature School in Port Macquarie, and what I wanted to do this afternoon was just a little bit about how we embed the cross-curriculum priority of sustainability into our learning program, and particularly how we take that beyond the school and how we teach out in the community and learn in the community as well. So a little bit about us. I'll make this very brief. We are, as an organisation, we cater for early years, so age 3 to 5. We have our primary school, which is K to 6, and we have just begun the journey into secondary. So we're at 7 and 8 at the moment and extending next year into year 9. Our values really underpin everything here as in our organisation, and we uphold the values of what we call connect, protect and respect. So connecting learning opportunities, connecting with our community and connection with nature. In terms of protection, we talk about valuing childhood, protecting the rights of children and advocating for protection of the environment. And as you can see there, respect, looking at value for self, others and their wealth. When we look at sustainability in terms of our primary and secondary programs in particular, I like to think of it as all connected and linked. And I was picked up by someone recently because I was saying it's almost circular, and he said, well, that's a triangle. So yes, it is a triangle on my screen, but in terms of how we look at it, it's circular. It all influences one another. So it's all about relationships. And so our classroom, we have a set classroom, but our classroom is influenced by the school environment. The school environment is influenced by the classroom, which is influenced by the community and so forth. So teaching and learning at the Nature School. So prior to coming here, I was so intrigued in terms of how was this school able to teach all these interesting nature-based topics whilst going off-site. And what I've learned over the years is that NESA really provide us with the breadth of learning. So of course, the nature-based analogy here, that they're like the grass on top. They provide us with all the syllabuses, with the content that needs to be taught. And for us, we want to go deep in the learning. And so we want to go deep into the grass, beneath the grass, down into the soil level. And so we like to call it conceptual learning. We link learning across multiple syllabuses. We have a heavy focus on providing nature-based learning. Our lessons are taught both on-site at school and off-site on adventure and field studies days. And we encourage all our teachers to incorporate learning from nature, about nature, or within nature when planning their units of work. Our adventure and field studies days. Now, these are probably the most talked about in the school communities. So we have 2 buses here at the Nature School at the moment that cater for K-8 students. All our teachers and TAs have light rigid license, so we are capable of driving them. And we take our kids out on adventures into the community. So for us, it could be about down to Dunbogan, which is about 40 minutes away on a bus. I know Year 8 recently, they headed up to Hat Head to study mangroves. And we have a suite of sites that we visit. Things like we have connections with Billabong Zoo, Timbertown, we go to local parklands, we venture to community organisations such as the Lost Plot or the Koala Hospital. We go to beaches to learn. We also venture to other waterways. And so at the beginning of the term, what we do as teachers is we sit down together, we look at what our students are learning conceptually, and we decide on about 3 to 4 sites which will enable students to apply their on-site learning to the environment, particularly in the areas of science and HSIE. Now, whether it be learning about, say, the diversity of homes in kindergarten or rocks and landscape formations in Year 7 and 8, these off-site adventure days, they really offer students a first-hand experience because it's relevant to them. It's in their backyard. Everything is very close by. And it enables them to make the images or the pictures on a screen, it's tangible. So no longer do we look at, for example, a starfish and we look at it and study it from a book or an online source or a YouTube clip. Kids actually get out, they get to have a look at and experience that organism up close. We find that by doing this, it gives students a sense of custodianship and a greater respect and care for the place, which if we go back to what Simon had said in Costa's quote about a love for nature, that's really what we do here, is try to bring about a love for nature so that we develop a connection to that. And most of the time, you know, as adults, if we think about a fond memory of a place that we've visited, there's that connection and we then want to protect it. I want to share a little comment that one of my Year 6 students made the other day when we went on a field studies adventure to, we participated in the Marine Bio Blitz, which was run here by a local organisation. And one of our students, the organiser was talking about nature and what we could see in nature. And I think this sums it up. This young boy said, he put his hands up and very respectfully he said, but we are all nature. And it just showed that linkage that he no longer saw himself as distinct from nature. I thought that was really beautiful. I know I'm bound for time, so I'm going to walk through this pretty quickly. So when we're planning learning at the Nature School, we talk about it as a conceptual learning. So we don't just have an English program that might study one thing and then a geography program that is separate. Everything is linked. So for us, this is an example of a Stage 3 Year 6 learning that they're doing this term. In English, we can see that they're studying a novel, Guardians of Gahul. They're looking at characterization. They're doing their own project-based learning around powerful owls in terms of advocation, education, and conservation. In geography, they're looking at the use of artificial lighting in community and these impacts on nocturnal species. In science, they're looking at solar system and Indigenous understanding. Creative arts, we look at black and white photography. And then in mathematics, along with learning the content, they get a chance to do an inquiry project. And we always try to link that inquiry project back to what they're learning in English, geography, and history, and science, sorry. And for that, we're looking at fauna crossings and what would be the best design for a fauna crossing over a highway. and how those fauna crossings also have an impact on our local wildlife. So this is just an example of an adventure day that Year 6 did to a local property here in Port Macquarie. And we linked in with Landcare, so Stephen Orwood, who runs Hastings Landcare, and they were running a project called Hollows in the Hastings, and it linked perfectly with what we were doing. And so we spent the day on site looking at nest boxes that had been installed around this property, just to see if there were what species were in there and the impact that these nest boxes were having. And this project was run because back in 2019, we had the devastating bushfires here in Port Macquarie that destroyed a lot of our land. This is another example of how we would run an adventure day. We're taking students this term to a place called Old Bottle Butt. It's a beautiful place, a beautiful tree here in Port Macquarie, and it's a red bloodwood. And it's often called the magic faraway tree to these kids because it is huge. But in Barrowan State Forest, what we get the kids to do is we get them to use their mathematical skills to calculate the approximate age of a tree. And if a hollow was to form, then what would be the potential size of it? And then with that, what species could then inhabit it? We like to, on our adventure days, make sure that we take as little as possible and always encourage our students to respect the environment by leaving it in a better state than it was. So picking up rubbish, making sure that we have what we say is the 3 Ds. It's the dropped, down and dead. So only taking things from the ground if they've dropped off a tree, if they're down on the ground, or if it has been deceased and we want to look at it under a microscope. Oh my gosh, I think I'm close to. This is an example of a sheet that we get Year 6 to fill in on these adventure days. Because we're not just about using those mathematical skills, we really want them to understand species as well. We're very big on observational skills. So for our students from K to 8, they take along with them a nature journal or an adventure journal, we call them. And in there, they're sketching their observations. And so for this one, they're looking at the different tree species. They're looking at the bark, the colour, the texture, what shape of the leaf, what are the flowers like, what are the gum nuts like, and using those observational skills to be able to identify which tree species it is. That was pretty quick, and I'm sorry if I rushed through it. I know I was told 10 to 15 minutes, not like, oh, I'll get through this really quick. But if you would like any more information, we have our Facebook, our Instagram, and our website that you can go to. And I'm also happy, if need be, to share my email for people to reach out to.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Again, 15 minutes is nowhere near enough to be finding about all these things. I will see if anyone in the audience had a question for Shannon. You can put it in the chat if you like. Again, I'm happy for you just to speak out. No one there at the moment. Shannon, I suppose the question I have, you know, because looks like they're going off site is a really important part of how you're doing it. And I get the sense that in some schools it's probably not as easy, but there's other things in that limit it. Do you have suggestions for people or reflections from those experiences of going outside that might be useful for other schools or other teachers?
Do you know, I learned this probably at my first A squared E squared PL session a couple of years ago. And it really changed the way I thought about nature. I had this big idea of nature is our bushlands, it's our rainforests, it's the waterways. And it's not. Nature is everywhere. Nature is between the between the cracks on a footpath. It's what goes up the wall, the mosses, the lichens. it is absolutely everywhere. And, you know, I do feel lucky that I get to experience this with the kids and take these kids off-site to these wonderful places. But don't underestimate what your school already offers. Just taking them outside into the playground, having a look around, getting down at grass level, check what's there. Because what's beneath our feet is a whole nother world. So my advice, don't think big, come back to what you have and really get the kids outside.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. That's great, I think, because yeah, you start where you're at, you know, it's those opportunities there. Oh, there's a couple of questions in the chat, smaller and big picture. One's about how do you work out the age of trees? So a maths question, is it? What's the conference?
I'm going to do this. I'm going to go, it's an approximate age of trees. And this took a lot of like research online, talking to, it was through connections with people in forestry as well. A friend of mine worked in forestry and we were talking, he goes out to do the studies, the ecological studies to check. And I said, look, help me out here. How do we do this? So what you do is you start at the base of a tree, you measure about 1 meter up, and then I think it's you do the circumference of the tree, and then you divide it by 2.5. But the good thing here is I don't tell my students whether they do it in meters or centimeters, and then we discuss it and figure out what it is, because you're going to get 2 very diverse answers. So that's me being that, you know, clever teacher, in that I'm not giving the kids the answers, and we're going to talk about, does that tree actually look like it's 150 years old, or is it more likely 15 years old?
That's great. It's really good discussion starters. And I'm just thinking about I've got a big tree on my property. I'm going to go and use that. It's great, Shannon. Someone else did ask as well about whether you knew if there was other nature schools in Australia. I don't know how long you've been the history of nature schools, setting it up. And
there's not another nature schools in our organisation. We're the only one here in Port Macquarie, but there are some amazing schools around Australia that are really going towards this way. I know, is it Bold Park? It's either in South Australia or Western Australia, one of those. Upper Sturt. Then you've got Living School that's in Lismore. And I think there's a few more that have, Kinmar and Terry Hills is a great one. We've had a couple of, I think 2 students have come from there when they moved up here. There's a couple more around there. I'm sure I could find a list for you, or try.
It might be something. Yeah, we'll have a look. Maybe that's something we'll do. I'll send a list around just for interest for people of if we can find some of the other schools, we'll pull them together just so people can have a look, because it's good to have a look, you know, that sense of similar philosophy, or what's different,
absolutely.
sort of thing. So thanks so much. There was a couple of other questions, but I might just come back to them because I'm just looking at the time as well. So one was a bit about looking at the connection between units of work between maths and English, but I'll come back to that, Shannon, if that's all right.
Yeah, and if any questions aren't answered, I'm happy to share my email, and those people can email me and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible.
Great. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much, Shannon. It's great. Our next speaker we have now is Daniel Levitt, who is from Our Lady of the Sacred Heart. Sorry, Daniel, I said it about 3 times. Lady of Sacred Heart in college in Kensington. I met Daniel at the end of last year at the 2023 Environmental Education Awards, and he was awarded the Sustainable Schools Teacher of the Year. So we had a really brief conversation at that event, and I was really happy that he could join us today so I can hear a little bit more about his project that he'd been involved with and he was talking about then. So I'll pass over to you, Daniel, just to share your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. And hello, everyone. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm on the Gadigal land of the Eora Nation in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. So I'll just share my screen. Share. Can you see that? Is that good to go? Okay, so my presentation is a little bit different. I want to talk to you about an integrated project with Year 8 that we worked with maths, science, and TAS, the leaders of learning across the 3 faculties, to develop a project that is for the whole cohort, and how to assess it and how we went about unpacking the project itself and then integrating the project into the classroom. So the school context. So we're an all-girls Catholic school in Sydney. It's roughly about 800 students, just above average ICSIA, and we have 5% First Nations students. Now, our school is a bit different to schools in the area because we have our convent on site, and our sisters have been there quite a long time, and our school's been here for 112 years. So we have a good partnership with them, which continues the charism of the college. So it's quite a strong connection with our community, with the girls and the sisters. So to start off with, from the leadership team, so I'm part of the leadership team, we wanted to integrate a different learning framework, and we started off with, let's see what the staff wanted to say. And so we ran a professional learning about what do we want the Ulsh graduate to be like, and Ulsh is our Lady of the Sacred Heart, and they came up with the ideas of critical thinking, collaboration. They want people to have citizenship, have sustainability, stewardship, just like our first speaker, about what does sustainable actually mean. But it was about empowering them to the 21st century. So from there, that led us to looking into frameworks that we could use for the college. And we ended up partnering with the Australian Independent Schools, New South Wales, with their Designing for Deep Learning. And on that, they focus on the 6 Cs, which is collaboration, critical thinking, communication, creativity, citizenship, and character. And it's how to embed or look through the lens of these Cs in the school. And then from there, that eventuated with, by chance, that we partnered with University of Sydney for this STEM enrichment program, which came about through connections. So that was a good partnership which also pushed us along the way to integrating curriculum. So when we reached out to Sydney Uni and we started to work out what we want to do, they first pointed us to the direction of what actually is integration, but how to actually integrate. Begin if you don't know what integration actually is. Now, on the left-hand side, here's a bit of some evidence about where do we want to be at the end product. So how much integration do you want? So on the left-hand side is disciplinary, which is disciplines working parallel to each other, and there's not much connection across the curriculum. You move up to multidisciplinary, where you have themes, maybe a college theme or a cohort theme, but they all still work in silos. Then you move into interdisciplinary, where you start to use data across the subjects or ideas across the subjects, so students may work in groups. And then you go to transdisciplinary, which is the gold standard, where you start to bring in industry to work in subjects, use the data from science, bring it across the maths, analyze it, all those. But we really wanted to say that's a bit too far to start off with. So we had the goal to develop an interdisciplinary project. From there, we said, all right, we have a project that we want to work with. What student agency do we want to look at? And student agency is how students think, how students take control, their choice. Now, you have teacher-directed all the way up to student-directed. Now, if you get to student-directed without upskilling the staff and upskilling the students, it can get a bit loose, and you don't really get the products that you may want to achieve. So we decided to have a structured approach, but still give student agency, which led us to the student-led. So a project-based learning model where they make most of the decisions, but we create the inquiry question. And that's went from there. So the next part of framework we used from there was we needed to know where we were as a school before we even changed our teaching framework. So on the same board of evidence, we went through a bit of brainstorming, and this was brainstorming with myself and the leaders of learning and some teachers within each of the faculties, looking about what curriculum integration do we want, what inquiry-based learning approach do we want, and then who are we, our teacher capacity. So we looked at what staff do we have, what are their skill sets, what are their goals. We then went to looking at school culture. What's the principal want us to do? What's the leadership want us to do? Are the LOLs, leaders of learning, willing to break open education, change their programs and adapt to this direction? And then you went into the partnerships, and are we willing to reach out to partners? Do we have role models such as alumni, such as local community members that'll be a part of this? And from this brainstorm, we found out that, yes, we were in the right frame of mind to start to open up the curriculum and start to brainstorm about what we want to go from here. So we came to the goal. We want to create an interdisciplinary STEM project that built authentic student engagement across science, tech, and maths. Now, we want it to be student-led and a focus on sustainability, and I want to be authentic and precision on sustainability. So we looked at the C's of citizenship, collaboration, and critical thinking. And the eventual is that we wanted them to pitch this idea with the ultimate goal of having a new sustainable high school. Now, that could come in many different forms in their own design, but that's our model they wanted to go towards. Now, how did we get there? So now we had a goal, and we knew we wanted a sustainable, integrated project. So with our partnership with New Pedagogies for Deep Learning, there was a variety of frameworks we could use, and this was one of them. That was 4 stages of design about brainstorming where we wanted to go. Now, the first stage is to assess, understanding the students. Now, what are the students' capabilities? What are the students' interests? What are the students' needs? What would the students engage with in this project? From there, we went into designing, looking at our teaching strategies, our partnerships, our spaces. Then what's the design look like? What are they actually doing? And I'll go through these in a moment to show you our stage step by step. We then implement it and let the project run, and then we always come back to measure and reflect. So the first part with assessing, we worked together with the staff, and we had the ultimate goal of sustainability. So with our leaders of learning and some teachers that they selected, we broke open each of the curriculum and the outcomes from science, tech, and maths. And they highlighted and looked for crossovers between the curriculum. What are common themes? What are common words? What is important to them? And additionally, what would they like to assess in the upcoming scope and sequences? Now, that was one of the biggest tipping points to keep moving along with this project, because in high schools, I suppose in schools in general, you're quite restricted regard with your preset scope and sequence. So we had to make sure we could break it open and restructure everything in the next year. So we came up with these outcomes. Now, was there too many outcomes at the time? We don't know, but with review, we can come back and narrow it down. But these are the outcomes we used from TAS, science, and maths. We then went to a learning placemat. Now, this is where you really look at what does the project look like. Now, in this learning placemat, which is also from New Pedagogies, it looks at the 4 lenses of learning design. Now, the first lens is pedagogical practices. So what type of teachings do we want to use? Now, we wanted to use high impact teaching strategies that really allowed for student engagement, such as collaborative learning, team teaching, student feedback. Then the learning partnerships, what industries, what partnerships, teacher to teacher, teacher to student, local members of parliament. Now, we reached out to a local environmental agency who came in and worked for an opening day for a hook session to really engage the girls. And at the end of the project, he was actually the one that gave feedback and sat on the panel for the Pitch Fest, which is unreal and authentic. We then looked at the learning environments. What do we actually have on site at school that we can leverage? So we've built a garden on site. We've got sustainable bins. We've got compost bins developing, and also what's happening inside the classroom, not just outside. So we have digital learning spaces. We have open planned innovative spaces where girls can work together. So we looked at the whole school, internal and external. And then finally, leveraging the use of digital technology. What can we do to increase the connection between the classroom and technology? So that was moving into the space of our Canvas LMS, our learning management system, which I'll go through in a moment. Now, finally, in the middle there, the 6 C's, to be able to do this, we needed to continue looking through the lens of the C's. Now, we assessed this project through 2 different lenses. One was our 6 C's rubrics. Now, each of our 6 C's has some subcategories towards them. So we chose 3 C's. three competencies. Now, if you look on the screen here, each of the girls would have received an opportunity to achieve anywhere on this learning progression of a C. Now, for example, with collaboration, working independently as a team, we needed to make sure our activities and our project allowed students to move from novice through to innovative, whether it be providing them opportunities to be team members, providing them opportunities to talk with each other, have challenges, have problems, and get over these problems. Again, with critical thinking, we needed to make sure they're able to critically think about a problem opportunity. So try to be a little bit open, but not too open that they lose control. And once the last one was citizenship, which is sustainability. So it needed to be attached to a sustainable practice. Now, to make sure we had accountability for the students to use this, we also had an academic rubric, which was aligned to the original outcomes that the teacher leaders of learning used. So they were marked through this rubric, but provided feedback on the Cs. So the task we developed was for students to be able to come up with a redesign of the school to make it more sustainable based on two driving questions. Now, the first driving question was optimizing spaces around the school to make them more sustainable, or the second driving question was to change the way sustainable energy resources reduce the need for non-renewable sources. Now, from the three subject areas, what was assessed was in tech, they used a digital Tinkercad product. So they had designed a space around the school on Tinkercad, which is a digital project. In mathematics was the calculations of the area, perimeter, and volume of this product and some sort of rate of energy that they developed through science. So it could have been water flow, could have been electricity and from solar panels or the like. And the third one with science, they had to develop a PowerPoint presentation that unpacked the concepts of sustainable materials, energy transfer systems such as conduction, convection, radiation, and the analysis from the maths data to sum it up in one form. So between the three of the subjects, they all linked directly to each other, but there was nuances between what they were actually producing in that subject alone. So how did it look? So we have Canvas LMS, and some schools use Google Classroom, other schools use what they like for the digital platform. In Canvas, we set up a step-by-step process for what students have to achieve across a period of a timeline. Now, they'll go through here and there'll be links and documents and guides to what needed to be achieved next. Now, the leaders of learning from each of the subject areas, they put their content into this, and so they knew what they were following on, and plus the other teachers could look into the Canvas module to see what they were doing in the other subjects. Students were also handed the hard copy booklet, which was the same thing, but not digital. And on the right, they were also handed the scope and sequence of what they were learning at any given time throughout the 6-week project.
Daniel, just 2 minutes if you can.
All right, thank you. And this is the work samples we achieved. So they range from so wide. So we had things like sustainable bikes on the school roof, and students would have to pedal to create energy, water tanks around the school, solar panels on a redesign of a new block on the building, compost areas around the school. Some girls developed a beehive, which produced wax for all the sandwiches. Some girls produced a sort of terrarium style recycle the water we use, so it goes back to be clean water. So it was such a diverse range of solutions, and these are year 8 girls too, so 13, 14-year-old girls. So it blew our minds what came back from this. So, and finally, what went well from this? So the timeline. So if everyone's going to do something like this, the timeline was actually for clarity for the teachers. The teachers loved the timeline. They loved to know what was due, what was next, what was happening, which created visibility. But our improvements, I think we needed to be a bit more targeted, I guess, a way to develop a sustainable house, because they were some of the better ones we saw. There was a lot of a tail that didn't really grasp the idea because it was too broad. So it needed to be a bit more narrow. And finally, probably a bit more linkage between the maths and science. Maths is always thrown out because they just think it's data collection, but there's so much more. They could do things like water flow, which goes into the Year 12 syllabus, or the like. And that's my email address if you wanted some more information on all those resources. I know it's a quick fire, 15 minutes, a lot of information, but thanks for your time.
Thanks again, Daniel. I know it's so much going on. Was that the process that you went through, like that sort of planning process? Was that over, what was the timeline for that project for you?
That, to be honest, that took us about 6 months, 6 to 8 months to do. But it was extended, like the product, that was the second edition of the project. The first edition was about a year, but
Yeah.
it didn't go down too well. So the second edition was about 6 to 8 months to really understand the pros and cons of what works when you talk with different faculty areas. Because teachers' time in education, it's far and few between. So we had to find time to meet. So it's about a 6 to 8 month journey to be able to do that. And that's because we didn't really know what it looks like at the end of it. But after we started to go with the Sydney Uni and see other schools do different things, whether it be on STEM or sustainability or innovation, like, oh yeah, so that's how they did that. And then we sort of tweaked our direction and understood the process of how to get there and the resources that scaffolded us how to get there.
It's fabulous. And do you see that going through that process, do you think that's had a bit more of an impact on, collaboration between departments and subject areas post that kind of specific unit, do you think? Or
yes, so I'm in the process of trying to integrate HSIE in English as well, and the process of a framework about understanding who you are and understanding like the requirements, the needs, and then what questions to ask at any given time as you go through from A to B. It does help for the teachers to have a vision of what they like to begin with. So our vision was sustainability. So once they have an idea, you can sort of manipulate the questions to go there.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Sorry. And I just asked my questions. Is there anyone else that has questions from the audience? I'm not sure if you just want to No, not at the moment. There's not in the chat. We do have a few comments. So it is really great though to see that alignment, that across those different areas, Daniel. It does look pretty looks really comprehensive, like a lot of different frameworks and really digging down on those skills that, that creative and critical thinking and that collaboration is really the great opportunities for students. So thanks so much, Daniel. Is there resources from the university part of stuff that people can access, or is that sort of?
Yeah, they'll be on. They're on the comments of the PowerPoint, but I can add them in there and provide a new one.
Yeah, okay, that'd be lovely if there was some other resources, we can just perhaps provide that to people in a follow-up email, because I think it's a lot to think about in your 15 minutes, but you can see that some of the tools there will be really useful for other people. Thanks so much, Daniel. It's great. And we just have one more speaker to go. So I have, sorry, there's a question there. I might come back to that at the end if I have time, Tal. Sorry, so our final speaker for today is Rachel Kernaghan, who is the Education Manager at the Kimbriki Eco House, which is in the northern beaches of Sydney. So Kimbriki team have a very long history of supporting schools to reduce waste and value organic resources and do lots of fabulous things. So I'll let Rachel tell you a bit about it. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. Thanks, Danielle. I'll just have a go at sharing my screen here. Picked a good time slot for me, even though, end of the day, but our site closes at 5 o'clock and we have about 1,000 vehicles through every day. And so it's just gone quiet and now I'm surrounded by beautiful bush. So it's a perfect timing. So I will try and keep to time. I've got my little stopwatch here. To remind me. So my name is Rachel Kernaghan and I similarly have a primary and a secondary teaching background, but waste is my passion, and I came here to Kimbriki about 13 years ago and realised this is where I'm supposed to be, and have been here ever since. And the last 2 years I have been managing the centre since Peter Rutherford's retirement. I'm going to click through and try and keep to time. Can everybody see my screen okay? Yeah, we've got a thumbs up there, but I can't click the, oh, here we go. Yeah. So I'd like to acknowledge the land from which I'm talking to you from, the land of the Gadigal and Gay Marigal people, and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Kimbriki is actually an Aboriginal word, and it means place of water plants. We're in a beautiful valley that was filled with water and is now filled with a lot of waste. But what we do here is we actually recycle and reuse 80% of what comes onto our site, and only 20% of it gets landfilled. That's dry waste landfill, not organic putrescible waste. If you'd like to find out more about Kimbriki, there's a great little video that I've put a link to here, the virtual site tour, and our website has a whole host of information on it. So yeah, it's an interesting spot, great place for an excursion, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We have children come here from kindergarten to year 12. The site is great for depth analysis for earth and environment science students. We engage with early childhood centres as well, and run community workshops and engagement with community and council. So a few of the things that I'm going to talk about today, I want to show you our resources on our hub, because there's some free hands-on resources that you can utilise and grab and go with, and that's the whole point of the hub being set up. So I guess our focus is very much about waste, and we have a little saying called eco-logos, which is the derivative words from the word ecology, ecos and logos, which literally translates from the old Greek as I take care of everywhere I go. And interestingly, it fits in quite well with Simon's comment from Costa about, you know, loving nature, and Shannon's comment about the custodianship, and her little friend who said that we are all nature. And we talk very much about you can't take care of something that you've never had any experience of. So we're always really encouraging of people to take the students outside, get outside ourselves, and think about how we live in nature. We do that in various ways. Our core little principles are the 4 R's: rethink, reduce, reuse and recycle, in that order, according to the Waste Act. And so we look at ways that we can undertake these 4 R's in our daily lives. So about reducing and using less, reusing, and then recycling. And then we also like to brainstorm other R's like repair and things like that. So one of the areas that we're really keen on at Kimbriki about recycling is one of the elements of our landfill stream that we can't accept, which is food waste. We are positioned above Narrabeen Lake, and so environmentally it's a very sensitive area, and that's why we don't have any red bin waste come to Kimbriki. We focus a lot on the impact of food waste in our landfill stream, and we teach about how to remove food scraps from our landfill stream. A garden waste gets collected and brought here on site and is processed on site by our partners Australian Native Landscapes, that makes beautiful soils and mulches that goes all over New South Wales. Our food scraps, though, the best place to deal with those is at the source. So we focus on sorting at the source, and the source, of course, is us. We're deciding that that's waste, we don't want it anymore. And we look at aspects of, okay, well, there is no away really. We live on a ball, and considering the impacts of putting things in a wheelie bin, popping it out on the street and it being taken away somewhere, and us not having to think about it. So this is our rethink element. We teach all about how to deal with the organic fraction, and through the Adam principles: aliveness, diversity, aeration, and moisture. So a lot of the questions that come up for us around composting and worm farming and growing food all will relate back to these 4 principles. And we explore that through our workshops. Here is our education hub. So on our website, kimbriki.com, you'll see in the middle bar there's the education hub. And we have an early childhood hub, a primary school hub, a high school hub, and a community hub. This is an area where we've tried to collate all of the resources that we as educators have developed over the years, so that it's accessible to all to utilise those resources. When you click in, so I've given you I've gone a little bit of a route through to show you how we can look at those resources. So if you click through into the primary school hub, for example, you'll see various tiles there. The recycling and reuse programs are linked to the site here, what we have on site. The virtual tour is a tour of our site. And on the other side of the squares, the videos and the on-site environmental practices is very much connected to our site and what we do here. The resources are the 4 middle tiles on this particular hub, the primary school hub. So you've got school compost and worm systems there, school recycling systems, K-2 resources, and 3 to 6 resources. So I've used this as an example to help you navigate through the education hub. So we're going to click down into the school composting systems. So in this tile, you've got all resources available to you there to help support setting up and the effective management of a compost system. So on the top right there, when you click in, you've got some useful signage that you can print off and use, laminate and use in your area, some example photos of different systems, a procedure there on how to set up an effective school composting system, a compost procedure, which is a 10-step procedure, and a worm farm procedure, another 10-step visual procedure, and then useful notes. So all of our workshop notes are available there for everybody, which is always a good reference point. An example of some of the useful signage might be on the bottom left there, a little sign that's got every day, this is what you need to do with the food scraps that you collect. We've got our green and our red lid bins here at Kimbriki Eco House and Garden, custom made moulded bin lids to help people ascertain which is a go bin and which is a I'm brewing, maturing bin. So there's everything here to help a school to set up a system. Or also this information is also available in our community hub, of course, for community gardens and shared systems like that too. I'll keep moving along. I've got the school recycling systems. So that tab takes you into waste audit. So Kimbriki is owned by Northern Beaches and Mosman Council, so we have a link there to what their offering is. And then we've got waste audit resources. And on the top right there, when you click in there, you have an actual timetable of how to run a waste audit that refers to the waste audit presentation, which is a slideshow of slides you can use. It tells you at what time to use slide 1, then slide 2, ask this question. It's all detailed there for you. There's a weighing sheet and there's a collation sheet to collate the results that you can see at the bottom there. You've also got some signage to help you out and a rationale for a waste-free Wednesday. So there's everything there to help you run a waste audit at your school. Then into the curriculum integrated resources. So I've just gone into one example here. I think this would have been, yep, in the K-2 section of Primary Hub, and I've gone into compost some. So this is focused on the top left image there. That's gone provides you with some teacher instructions on how to run a lesson on composting. This is one of the activity sheets where their children can either draw or write down what they can put in the compost and the procedure. We've got curriculum links in there. A majority I've linked it with the science curriculum. There's of course a lot of literacy and maths that happens in all of that as well. We were a bit limited on space with all the curriculum links. You've also got there an example. The bottom middle picture is of doing some of the waste audit. The top right, window to the world, that's a wonderful thing to do with even just cut up bits of cardboard or old picture frames, where you're getting students to really focus in their attention onto an area. It might be that they're focused on a piece of litter or a section of soil in the garden where they're investigating invertebrates in the soil. It can be anything, but really helps the students to direct their learning. We've got some great resources on senses wander as well, so engaging their senses. There's resources about worms and worm farming and using that as a focus for living things and labelling living things. Some other areas, there is an early stage 1 unit of work on waste that is a 6-lesson program which has got all of the KLA's outcomes linked to it as well, and it's set out per lesson with all of those curriculum links in there. Your soil detectives is another great one for a further investigation, science-led investigation into what soil actually is. I'm aware of the time's running out, so some of the high school resources would be, of course, our depth study, the resource management part of Earth and Environment Science. We have students who come here and look at waste management and also look at the data of the tonnage of waste that is being recycled or being reused or actually going to landfill. A few weeks ago, we had Year 7 Food Tech come. They wanted to learn about how to create great soil and healthy plants, grow good, healthy plants. And Year 9 and 10 Environmental Change and Management in Geography as well. So yeah, have a explore of the Education Hub and yeah, feel free to use any of those resources. We are having some days, professional development days here on site for early childhood. We do have an early childhood hub as well that's linked to the early years framework. And that date is in November, and then a waste and sustainability professional development day for primary and high schools in September. So if you have any questions for me, I will very happily answer them, or I'm happy also, Danielle, for you to share my email if anybody wants to contact us directly. I haven't put that up on a slide, unfortunately, but you've got it so you can share it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rachel. I can, if everyone's happy, I can share people's emails. I'll do a follow-up email after the session and share that. Thanks so much, Rachel. It's really generous that, you know, there's a lot of content and experience that's gone into developing those curriculum materials. So it's, you know, it's very generous share, really, you know, that you run the Education Hub. Is there anyone that had any questions for Rachel? I'm happy if you wanted to ask them in person or if you want to put it in the chat. The thing I find that's really great about the waste stuff that you're working on, Rachel, is really that connection between curriculum and the campus, you know, so it's like that on-ground learning opportunities that there are for students that they can, you know, be making that change.
And I think that's the way we try and teach it. We try and get them to think about what in their everyday life, what could I do? What could I, that's what we always ask them before they leave. What could I do today or tomorrow that could have a small impact? And we talk about the impact that each of us individually can have as, you know, a collective, you know. The Dalai Lama saying, you know, you think you haven't got much of an impact because you're just a little small being. Have you ever been in a room with a mosquito? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think as well, you know, the focus on food waste for me is really interesting for students, because to me that's an area where they have the ability, they have agency. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah, we all do. That's one of the biggest things that we could do is to manage our food waste and reduce our food waste. Like 40 to 50% of the average Australian bin is food waste.
Yeah.
And we grow food here on site, and it takes a long time to grow food. It's hard work, and you know, you're battling with nature, and we need to respect food more. We're wasting far too much food.
Yeah.
But we can also make beautiful food out of our food scraps. And we talk about, well, what is a food scrap? You know, it's not your whole sandwich because you've decided you don't like ham sandwiches anymore, or your banana is always mushy every time you pull it out your bag. Have that conversation with the people at home, make your own lunch, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And do you find that you know, your students across the ages are receptive to, you know, when you're working with different students? What's the
and we do get a lot of primary students here, but we're increasingly getting a lot more high schools who are wanting to, they're obviously understanding that need for change at their schools and the need for active sustainability at their schools, rather than, okay, we've got this sustainability cross curriculum priority, how are we actually, let's walk the talk, rather than you know, trying to tick a box. And they're really open to it. They're really open to it. And they're the ones who are going home and speaking to people. And I bump into people and they say, oh yeah, my child came up the other day and now they're telling me they want us to do this, and they're telling me off for putting that in the wrong bin or things like that. So yeah, and that's where we need to show that you know, we're advocates for change and that we're walking alongside them to empower change to happen. And yeah, that's our role as educators.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I have a
Thanks.
quick comment to make while everybody's here. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yes, we've been talking about all these amazing initiatives, and I'm sure that we all share in our hearts all the values and initiatives that have been shared here. So I'd like to take this opportunity to actually just invite everyone to think about ways that we can actually have sustainable uniforms. And if your school is already tackling that one, perhaps share with us, because we are talking about recycling and the plastic and the pollution, microplastic and all that. And we ourselves find it a little bit challenging to find a way to compromise price, quality, and sustainability. So if anyone would like to throw any ideas, we would appreciate so much. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for that. I might just I'll put that idea down in the chat and maybe ask for some feedback. I know my children's school last year updated their uniforms and there was nothing done with the old uniforms. There was no discussion about where does it go. So definitely an issue. And I think there are possibly a few organisations. I know there's an organisation in Sydney for secondhand uniforms. So I'll take that on, and if anyone else has any ideas, please flick them through in an email, and I'll you know, we can make a bit of a collaborative idea bank, perhaps. Thanks so much. I'm just looking at the time, everyone, and I feel like we're probably going to draw to a close, and I don't have my last piece of paper that have my notes on it, so I'm just going to have to free form that now. The few things that I did want to say, I do have an evaluation survey. So if there's anyone here, there's only 4 questions. If you can take a moment, even click on it now and just answer the 4 questions. What your evaluation does is it helps us at Sustainable Schools work out what people are interested in, what you'd like next, and also give some feedback to the people that are funding our programs. So with that, a thanks to Midwaste for supporting our professional development programs, and a real special thanks to all our 4 speakers today, to Simon, Daniel, Shannon, and Rachel. I really appreciate people spending their time after a long afternoon. A couple of other things that are coming up in terms of professional development. In October, our association's running a state environmental conference. It's down at Wagga, or Albury actually. So there's calls for expression of interest out at the moment if you would like to submit a paper, or perhaps have a look if you might like to come along and attend. They're a great place to meet like-minded teachers and educators and just get a bit of inspiration and find out what's happening. I think the Nature School's actually hosting an outdoor education conference in July. So if you're in the Mid-North Coast, that's something that you might want to have a look at. I'd also encourage you to join our Sustainable Schools email if you're not there, and have a look on our website for some networks that might be a teacher network in your area. I know that Coffs Harbour, we've just been involved in reinvigorating the Coffs Harbour network. So they've got a meeting in July. There's also one Bellingen and Nambucca, and I'll send a link to the website that has where there's some other networks in your area that you can connect up with. So thanks again, everyone. Special thanks to all the speakers. It was really great to have such a diversity of stories and experiences shared with us today. So thanks so much.